Sora and Shiro live their life by one phrase: blank will never lose. They will always win and always exist as one. Really, they barely have any choice when it comes to needing to exist as one and be together forever, or when it comes to living as normal citizens properly adapted to society. But where they do make all their decisions is in the games they play. This they hone together obsessively, and their knowledge reaches such an absolute level and confidence that they unwittingly have challenged the highest authority of games, Tet, the god of games himself. Through that, they are drawn away from the chaotic and unpredictable rules of the world of humans into this world, a world ruled by the outcome of the games those living in this world play. This is heaven sent for the duo, and they quickly show their skills and inability to be defeated. They're also taking technology with them from Earth into this world that seems to not exactly be familiar with it. They wager their whole lives as an offer in exchange for a huge bag of coins. Thinking she has an easy advantage using her trick to cheat in the game they're playing, which is allowed according to the 8th Covenant that says a game only ends in a loss when someone is caught cheating, Sora uses that knowledge to his own advantage. In fact, he cheats himself, and with this we are already shown how they use the certainty that their opponent has an advantage over them for their own gain. They also come across Steph and Kamiya, playing for their title as Queen of Elkia, the Kingdom of the Humanity. Shiro notices with the help of her phone camera that Kamiya is cheating, but even with her mathematical genius, she isn't able to figure out how exactly. Sora lets Steph know that her opponent is cheating, and with that, has played his first move. She approaches them in their room at night and wants to blame them for her loss. This is what Sora knew would happen, and he outs her flawed playstyle this way by judging her character and attitude. She doesn't like being doubted for her ability, and they, of course, play a game. The outcome yet again results in Sora's favor, getting him the desired result of a draw because he could predict what she would end up choosing in this modified rock-paper-scissors game. And on a whim, he voices his wish he'd like to have fulfilled. While his plan was to be able to have her on his side and live in her palace, his desires gain the upper hand and he wishes for her to fall in love with him. Shamefully, the self-loathing virgin falls into a deeper hole once accidentally separated from Shiro. Both completely lose their ability to function once out of each other's sight. And as this story unfolds, I will try to really unpack the mystery of why this could be. In any case, they now have her under their spell, and the power of the covenants coming from Tet prove absolute in their effectiveness, even at Steph's conflict with this result once she catches herself from being starstruck by Sora. They now live with her in her palace, as she is the granddaughter of the former king of Elkia. Quickly, Sora and Shiro go through their checklist of things they want to achieve in this world, and up next is to object to the coronation of Kamiya as the new queen of Elkia. Learning more about this world, they've already figured out that the reason Kamiya is even able to win is because she is secretly supported by an elf who uses magic. There are 16 sentient races in this world of Disboard, called the Exceed, and they all have their various strengths and abilities. With the confidence of elven magic, Kamiya was easily able to challenge any opposition to make it seem like there is any chance of someone else claiming the throne at all. But among the humanity, no one could surpass a secret use of elven magic. Just like in Greek mythology, Epimetheus created all creatures on Earth with their specific strengths, or more specifically, he shaped them. He was responsible to give them specific traits, whether it is fangs to hunt or wings to fly. And in hindsight, he forgot to give a special quality to the naked monkeys, humans. Luckily, Prometheus had enough foresight to give humanity his fire and knowledge to, like him, predict the future. This unassuming power is used to the utmost by Sora, and is the essence of his strategy and how he's able to claim victory over others, despite not having any special ability like the other races on this board. He understands Kamiya's disguised use of magic, and yet again uses his opponent's hidden advantage as his own. The game they play uses both Sora's charisma and Shiro's calculation as a strength, and once her strategy becomes futile, he taps into the hearts of the living chess pieces using his own understanding about humanity, coming not from his own experience with any human contact, but of course by the objectified forms of love in dating simulators. Kamiya turns out to be a crybaby under her cold demeanor, and Kohaku takes the throne. But only one of them apparently can be a representative, so they spent 3 days playing against each other. Whoever would win 2 in a row would become king or queen, but in their lifetime of playing each other, no one ever came out as a true victor. They go over the rules again and realize there can be multiple representatives for humanity, making this all a bit of a detour. They take their throne as king and queen in their own style, help introduce new domestic economic policies they learned from games as well, and finally step out in their neat uniforms to speak to his fellow humanity. With Shiro's support, Sora finds the courage to give the humanity an important speech. He is well aware of them being the lowest ranked race among the Exceed, but provides them with a proper understanding to remind them that their own weakness is really a strength. They might not have magic, claws or wings, but build upon the knowledge they have to focus on the outcome of the games that determine this world. They have nothing to rely on other than seeking out knowledge in order to understand the result, and while this seems like a weakness, it gives them the opportunity for a creative solution, other than just relying on their strengths like a crutch. This rings true in the ears of the people of Elkia, and with that, even Steph starts to see how these two strangers might be the prophesized rulers her grandfather talked about, who would have the wisdom to see their weakness as a strength. They also declare war on all other nations at Steph's dismay, though they explain their strategy about it to her. Then they even get into a conversation with the god of this world, Tet, and he's excited to see them understand him and challenge him to claim his title for themselves. Sora is happy that this is the purpose he plays in this world, and that Tet wasn't trying to give him some noble quest to help others or something like that. This is unbelievable for Steph to witness, and she is only more impressed with them being the ones to restore Elkia. Well, this all seemed to be the case, but it seems to have proved otherwise when all she sees Sora and Shiro doing is offload the paperwork to her and others, while doing nothing but lazing around, playing games all day, and holding themselves up in a dark basement, avoiding any sunlight and having a chaotic sleep schedule. So, Steph challenges them to have them turn into decent people. But Sora wants to take the opportunity to use the power of the Covenants to become popular among girls instead. But Shiro is in the way of that. This in my view foreshadows something that I can talk about later, particularly related to the movie, which I will also be including in this. Anyway, she naturally loses, because as much as she had her grandfather's words echo in her ear about the potential of the humanity, she didn't let him finish his sentence saying that if she's going to face another one of her own kind, well, she's kinda screwed. Still, Sora and Shiro step into their roles to do some leadership decisions, including beating some others who would like to challenge them. Steph feels like her work in keeping some sense of stability by dismantling the other powerful regions of Elkia bit by bit has been a bit of a waste. But her explaining this simply now shocks Shiro and Sora for seeing that Steph is actually very smart. She boasts how she was top of her academy and is of high social status, which the two needs of course do not see in a good light. And they use their favor for the game she lost earlier to make her their pet for the day. Shiro seems to have especially taken a liking to humiliating Steph and gets her to lose over and over and steals her clothing. In the end, Sora reveals that there are certain games she just can't win because of a lack of specific information. And with that, reveals that the reason they even have gone outside is to look for a library. Steph realizes that this whole time, they haven't been just lazing around doing nothing, but been on an obsessive neat information binge that on the outside just looks like a gaming binge. Though, I'm sure they did that too after burning out and getting depressed about the lack of success in their research. Steph tells the two now that her grandfather lost the library to a Flügel, and Sora completely loses respect from her and the previous king for gambling their information away. So, they got no choice but to win it back. And inside the library they meet Jibril, the angel hungry for information, who in her speech rings with various impactful words in different languages like she caught a terrible strain of philosophosis in her tongue. Sora wagers their tablets with 40,000 books, which she can't refuse upon confirming that Sora and Shiro are indeed not of this world, by checking each other's spots where life originates. They play a game of word chain where they can make any object appear and disappear by simply saying the word, and the goal is to have the other player die or get them to not answer for 30 seconds. She offers herself and everything she has in case she loses, which she is sure she won't. Now, from a human perspective, it would seem like Sora used the most powerful tool right away from the beginning, but it turns out this will be part of his ruse. She quickly protects them, and then they basically just have some fun, with a scene that is totally something uninteresting to me, because I am a person of refined taste. Sora uses his more advanced knowledge of the planet's structure, removing the mantle and the crust, plus of the atomic structure of physics to win over her. Then he even saw ahead that he would use his final word by writing it on a paper earlier on. I never actually heard of the Column Force, and I know doing this might be annoying because this is a fantasy anime, but I checked up on it, asking AI if its removal in this case would result in a hypernova, and apparently it's too unpredictable to even say what would happen with its removal, but I mean, who cares? The 142 coin flips later on make no sense either, by the way. I only ask myself about it because I wondered how consistent it all is, considering this is a pretty detailed anime in describing its cause and effect process, at least for the games. And now, with this victory, Jibril has been put into her proper role. Her scientific investigative spirit no longer is an end goal in itself, but now is a servant in the aims that life wants to achieve. Like Sora says, she had no respect of the unknown, only being curious about it, and hence couldn't see her failure coming. The next thing Kohaku wants to conquer is the Eastern Federation, the nation of the werbeasts. Apparently they possess a sixth sense and an ability to read people's minds, so they gather as much information as possible in order to figure out a strategy. They get a good view of the embassy of the Eastern Federation built in Elkia, and the angel reminisces a bit on her memories as a war machine. And once they return, Sora starts to question the former king's choices. He lost a bunch of land, seemingly for no reason, which he judges a lot, thinking it as foolish. This doesn't sit well with Steph. As he continues drilling her grandfather, she starts to cry and again doubts Sora's character. Shiro thinks he went too far, so he continues to try to get to the bottom of this. Jibril tells him that even if he is someone who puts a lot of thought into things, he should not project his own psychology onto someone else and assume that the former king put as much thought as he did into his confusing actions. But Sora rejects this. While admitting that, indeed, humans do not think much at all and are foolish like he himself is, he believes in the potential of humanity, of those individual few who manage to transcend the crab-like nature of the masses. Most of all, he sees this potential expressed in his younger sister Shiro. Having been a child so extraordinary, she got trained in some facility and only met her older brother once she was 3 years old. Her first words to him were, when she heard his name, which means sky in Japanese, "You really are empty." He immediately was starstruck by her ability to create a double entendre, while also being able to judge his character for the emptiness it expresses. This is another curious hint I'm going to include once we dive deeper into the psychological mystery of Kohaku later on. The story continues with him explaining his hope and love for humanity's potential, which is overheard by Steph, and she gives him a key that she was entrusted with by her grandfather. Turns out he had been conducting research all along, and was only able to give out this information because he fully accepted the fact that he can no longer help this kingdom, and that the future ruler would save Elkia. He wasn't able to share any of these things while he was alive, but since he's long gone, wrote it down for them to find. So, they meet up with the werbeasts, and with all the research that Kohaku has done, are able to quickly expose the rumors around the apparent mind reading that they possess. He ends up making a deal offering the race piece of the humanity, which would give them total control over him and everyone else of Elkia. And also gives him an offer he can't refuse, because if he would, it would legitimize what he says about the lack of the actual mind-reading ability in the eyes of the other nations, leaving them vulnerable. So there is no choice but to play the game, and as they take their time to make preparations for this game, Sora and Shiro prepare themselves as well with Sora vanishing all of a sudden. This part of the story is pretty cool. I can't really retell it in the fashion it is told, so I'm just going to start explaining what's going on. Kohaku had been playing a game against Clammy and the elf Feel. They would play to steal each other's existence, made up of pieces that are sorted by the value ascribed to them by their deeper personality, namely by how their own unconscious is organizing them. The winner gets to make 2 demands of the other person, and in the end, Sora chooses to have each other keep the pieces of their personality in their memory, meaning they have complete knowledge about each other, at least as far as they know themselves. And he also wants to be able to alter Field's memories. One could say this is a completely ridiculous game to play, but I think this reflects another one of those things that can be explored in a psychological way. What I'm thinking of is that Sora has enough self-knowledge in order to understand how certain aspects are of such importance to himself that no matter if he would try to forget them or escape them, they would resurface on their own and bubble up again into his life. So, in this way, Shiro is able to slowly regain her memory of what has actually happened, even though most of Sora's identity has already completely vanished into the unconscious. The things that manage to reach Shiro despite everything else being lost are his plans for winning, his full trust in her, and finally, even her herself. So, she is able to set off the chain reaction to end the game and win. And despite his unshakable trust in her that can weather any storm, they both cry from having had to endure so much time apart. But with that, the stage is set for Sora to be able to succeed in confronting the war beasts for the Eastern Federation. Again, he is using the hidden advantage of the war beasts against themselves. With the help of Clammy and Feel, they are able to figure out that there is a kind of magic at play here. At first, Kuaku gets super scared though because they think that the game is playing in Tokyo, which hits too close to home, literally. Luckily, it is just a random digital cityscape, and the game can begin. They are playing against the granddaughter of Ino, Izuna. Early on, Sora asks her when she had fun the last time she played, and this question weighs heavily on her, since she seems to not play for fun at all, but simply is a tool to be used for her skills. She also hasn't played any fair games before, so there probably weren't moments she was pushed to her limits. With Shiro and Sora, this is a different story. Steph is here too, I guess. And they slowly become familiar with the game they have been placed into. Izuna is forced to use her special ability that would give her an unpredictable advantage, since the laws of physics no longer govern her movements. Against this, Sora and Shiro have no chance, and both end up getting caught in her crossfire. Excitedly, Izuna triumphs over her win, having smiled strongly while playing against the two. But it turns out, this has been all part of the plan, and Steph shoots the last shot at Izuna to end this game. They had figured out how the NPCs move within the game, and placed Steph exactly in the place she needed to be to shoot Izuna after Sora and Shiro had sacrificed themselves. Izuna thinks that now her and her people will live under tyranny, but the humanity have no such plans. It is their idea that ultimately, the races will in the end unite and use each individual race piece in a game against God himself. Since that is spelled out by the last of the 10 Covenants, that they should have fun together. After a quick fake coin flip that lands on its side by throwing it into a gap on the ground, they decide to both win and create the Elkia Federation, where the war beasts would have their own rights just like the humanity. With that, the season ends. They speak of their plans to challenge Ted, the god of games himself, and everything else is just promised on the horizon and written in the light novel, which I didn't read, and is still being written. Of the existing 12 volumes, this season is volume 1 to 3, and the movie, No Game No Life 0, is volume 6. In this movie, we see the origin story of what would become an undeniable fact later on, sparked from the imagination of the character Riku. It is told by Ted to Izuna, while she is naturally losing to him in chess, and is a myth of what happened 6,000 years ago. During that time, Ted wasn't ruling over anything yet, and hence, war still waged across all nations. The world had been covered by toxic ash which covered the sun, and the humanity were on the brink of extinction. Holed up in caves, they are only fighting for their survival. Riku is the leader of this group, and it starts out with him having to sacrifice one of his people for the gain of the many. This weighs heavily on his conscience, but currently he is seeing no other option, and more importantly, he is starting to despair over not seeing any meaning in this. He continues his exploration so he would find more ways to keep him and the humanity alive, and stumbles upon something very peculiar. A lone entity of the Ex Machina, the robot race that shares a collective intelligence. Yet, this one is different. Not just in her stating that she would let Riku reproduce with her, but also in her being disconnected from her collective network. She asks him to play chess, which he thinks is a waste of time, but it seems he has no choice. This machine intelligence is one that seems to spark something in him as well, as much as he seems to not be concerned with her silly question of wanting to understand the human heart and playing chess. He is, as always, just concerned with survival. Her curiosity in him wants to understand the irrationality of his heart, because according to her cold and calculating perspective, there is no reason in the humanity's attempt to try to continue living in such a hostile environment. Hearing this hurt Riku, because he himself is also struggling with the question of what the point of this curse of life even is. Her having hurt him prompts her to reveal her weak spot so he could end her life, but he has no intention of doing this. They take a bath and play a game of chess. She continues saying she wants to learn more about Riku's heart, but also doesn't want to hurt him. He answers that this doesn't make any sense. If she wanted to learn more, she could just corner him and pry out information that she could bring back to her cluster, her collective intelligence. But surprisingly, even so to herself, she doesn't really want to return to her cluster. It is not something of interest to her, despite its irrationality and resulting error messages in her system. It seems that with her new name, Shvi, she has gained a desire for individuality. They discover some ancient elven thing, but aren't sure what it could be yet. The place turns out to be quite dangerous, so they want to leave, but can't because of the Black Ash storm. This leaves no reason to not play a game, and he asks her if she brought her chess set. He loses, and she asks him why he would even play against her, knowing he would lose anyway, as he always has so far. But he says there is nothing determining him to lose, as he feels he's making progress. She concludes this behavior and the unlikely existence of the humanity has its causal origin in their heart. It is something Riku can't help but continue to despair over though, not understanding the meaning of it all. Their meeting catalyzes in him and her a process of exploration that could get them to the meaning of it buried in the heart. But so far, he has no answer, and only knows of his brokenness. With her determination to always listen to Riku in order to figure out what is in his heart, a new spark of life has come alive in him. He recalls the perspective he had in his childhood, which sounded simple, but at least provides a meaningful starting point to start taking the actions that could actually make his life meaningful, and doesn't corner him to a limited sense of keeping alive a strategy just for self-preservation. So, he forges a plan and a map to achieve a starry ideal. And right as this happens, their colony needs to escape from an incoming threat. Riku crowns Koron as their new leader and gives her an escape route. His newfound path to at least explore a sense of meaning inspired in him various rules which the humanity abide by, in order to be the change they want to see in the world. He thinks this could all sound too crazy for them, but they are on his side. They know as well that no one will come save them, and they have to take the necessary steps to forge a path that could change things for the better, despite their obviously weak position. What they want is to align all of the powerful, destructive weaponry used by various races all into a single spot, hoping to penetrate the planet's core. This concentration of power would spawn a thing called the Sunyastra, a holy grail that provides ownership to the one who claims it, and they plan to steal it. Riku and Shvi go to their hideout, and they talk about the infinitesimally small chance of their success, and the total irrationality to even consider it. But Riku tells Shvi that you can't measure everything by statistics, whether it's 100 or 0%. Sometimes you just have to go for it against all odds, because otherwise, what's the point? It is good to gather information, but it is equally important to not let your life be determined by limiting yourself to it, and as a result, stop using your imagination. Riku now goes for his own gamble and proposes to Shvi, but she has to reject. After all, she can't reproduce with him, and he would stay a virgin forever. But that doesn't matter to him. It is not what he desires. He just wants to be with her for the rest of his life. This is the kind of spiritual birth he wants to give life to with her. There's something bothering her from her past, namely, that she was actually the one who has caused humanity to be in this awful state of nigh extinction. She couldn't accept them being together, for he must hate her for this. But he already suspected that this was the case, and he doesn't mind that she destroyed his ability to have a normal life, and simply wants to look forward with her. Koron visits and makes their wedding official, engraving their names into a gem and immortalizing them. They continue the plan, and this time Riku starts to interact with the elves. The plan is set up, and even at the expense of his health. He starts to really reach his limits, and she decides he should rest for the day, because there is enough time. She continues the plan on her own, and runs into someone we already know. Jibril. Of course, she voices her curiosity in this ex machina that seems to have separated herself from her cluster, but Shui chooses to fight her, even though an ex machina would not do so in this situation. As a last resort, Shui wants to at least have her experiences stored somewhere, and requests to make contact with her cluster. The cluster intelligence denies her, because of numerous logic errors she contains. She demands that experience should be stored, as much as this data of the human heart contains errors in logic. In the end, she is accepted for providing new data, but she has to survive until the transmission is complete. Barely she manages to survive, and her valuable information brings out a tear from the machine. Riku gets the information from an ex machina of her destruction, and she tells him in the message that this does not go against the rules of not letting anyone die, because technically she's not a form of life. As much as Riku suffers, he knows the hypothesis of his plan must continue to live on, and all the pieces are starting to get into position for the Sunyaster to spawn and be snatched by him. Powers are unleashing. All the weapons are causing massive explosions and destruction, and Riku sees what he has been looking for. But he's not able to reach it. He has not won the game and not won the prize. He screams out how he cannot let this be in vain, and that there has to be a meaning to this. And with this, his prayer is born in his heart, to a god not yet named by anyone but him, the god of games. With this prayer in his heart, the shadowy figure of his childhood imagination is now making itself more visible, bringing him the peace of mind he was looking for. And that's how the myth goes. Ted is finished telling of that story, and vanishes once Sora, Shiro and Steph arrive. Izuna snatches the gem Steph is wearing to confirm that this is indeed that ancient gem from way back then. It turns out, Riku's childish imagination had been right all along, and while it took a long time, the hope born in his heart had ended up ruling the world of Discord. Towards the end, we see the ring of their marriage, the bond of their eternal love, falling deep, deep into an abyss. I think this movie can be taken as a sort of prefiguration to what is now being played out by Sora and Shiro. And this origin story shows the first piece that has been moved in this long game that Kohaku are trying to end in their lifetime. Viewing the story from a psychological perspective, in both Sora and Riku is shown the lack of a unique meaning. Sora had smiled because everybody else had, and Riku survived because everybody else does. They both lived an existence merely as a persona, part of a society on the outside. This fits well into how Carl Jung describes the persona as a collective function. It is a mask that pretends to be a unique individuality, but really just functions as a mask representing a collective value. In contrast, Shiro and Shui play a similar but opposite role in the wholeness that is Kohaku. Jung would call this the soul, or in Sora's case, the anima. Similarly, she also represents a collective, but instead of the society of the outside world, she is a personification of the collective unconscious of the psyche. As can be seen though, in both cases, their contact results in them removing themselves in some sense from the collective, but also coming into contact with it now and again. With Shiro, this is not really expressed that much, but with Shui, it is very directly given expression to with her being part of a cluster, which really is what the collective unconscious also is. They catalyze each other's uniqueness, just like in our life when we are torn between things in the inside and outside. Through the friction that the ego endures between the outer world of society and the inner world of the collective unconscious, something new can emerge between them. There is a potential third that is neither one or the other, but is paradoxically both at the same time, and this is beautifully expressed in Kohaku. The kanji used to write the word Kohaku is made up of both Sora and Shiro, while at the same time, its expression as blank denotes its meaning to be neither one or the other as well. It is pure potential and ambiguity. This ambiguous middle gives rise to the symbol of what Carl Jung called the self, which is an expression of the wholeness of the personality, both consciousness and the unconscious, while the ego is simply the center of consciousness. The self is an expression of the potential of what the personality can achieve, But this potential can never be realized if the ego tries to simply deny the unconscious and take its place, and be the sole authority. But since Sora puts his union with Shiro as the highest value, he clearly is set up for greatness. Not only that, but another expression of this figure of the self in this story is depicted in Tet, the god of games Riku had devoted his first prayer to. As much as Sora might be conceited to think of himself to be strong enough to ever challenge Tet, he also knows that he can only do so with the assistance of Shiro and their existence as Kuaku. He also looks up to Tet as someone with great skill that he aspires to as well, making him an ideal he wants to achieve, but ever aware of his own mortality and weakness. To add a short explanation about what I was trying to make sense of for a while, I couldn't ever piece together why Shri would be the cause for the destruction of Riku's hometown, but I'm still trying to attempt to give an explanation in this time I give myself to write a script about this. I think what it is trying to express is that, of course, following in one's soul will lead one to a kind of downfall. Living as a normal person in society means to basically just feel an identity with your persona, who the world tells you to be. But once you listen to the silent whispers of the soul and stop going simply by the common advice you hear from those around you, and look into your dreams to see where they could guide you, the prospects of you becoming a normal and adapted person basically gets destroyed. It is a sacrifice required for those who try to follow their own dreams. The same thing happened to Sora, who seemed to be quite well adapted to the world before he encountered Shiro, which led him to turn into an 18-year-old NEET that can't adapt to outside reality. Any recognition of popularity was something he had to forsake for his soul's sake. That being said, once the journey of regaining the soul is complete, the ability to adapt to the world will return, but this time not at the expense of one's authenticity. Overall, this story expresses so many things that are of great meaning to me. Since these are just 4 volumes of the light novel, I truly hope that the anime can one day follow. To see how Kuaku takes on the challenge of facing the other Exceed races and all the genius games they're going to play is so exciting. I've never read the light novel, but I did some research because I was curious how far ahead the story was, and to my surprise, many of the races haven't been faced yet at all. I do wonder how the story is progressing, but to me, the potential for it is enormous. Not just in the sense of how good it could be, but simply how this sets up such an exciting basis for a psychological transformation of the personality. I'm sure going on this journey to try to write this story, to gather enough real-life experience in order to have it continue in a proper way, is very complex. But if I go by my experience, and the little I really know of the story so far, having just watched the anime and the movie, I really look forward to the day where Kuaku, the eternal duo that never loses, will get to learn the paradoxical meaning of what it is to win by losing. Because as I see it, that is the only way the story can really fulfill its true end. And with this, they might be able to bring the treasures they have found back to Tokyo. And not only the star-filled Sunyaster cup, but also find the ring deep in the abyss that contains the meaning of endless love.